Hi, everyone. This is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your sun and rising sign horoscopes for the month of May 2020. In this video, I'll be taking a look at the air signs, Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. So we begin with Libra, and the big news of the month is that Venus is turning retrograde this month. And that means that Venus will have been in the sign of Gemini from early April all the way until the first week of August. This is um, especially important month to take a look at the whole sign house of Gemini in everybody's chart. So that's what we're going to be doing in yours this month, starting with a huge transit that is happening, really culminates a long series of transits are culminating, I should say, on about May 23rd. So I'm starting further into the month for a reason, and you'll get it in just a second. If you're a Libra rising, there's a new moon in Gemini in your ninth house on May 22nd, 23rd, right around there. Mercury and Venus are conjoining right around that time in Gemini in your ninth house. All are squaring Neptune in the sign of Pisces in your sixth house. Now, on May 13th and 14th, Venus will turn retrograde in a square to Neptune. Between the 1st and the 5th of the month, Venus and Gemini will square Neptune and Pisces. Really, all month long, Venus is square to Neptune, and from your ninth house to your sixth house. And then it's just a matter of some of the repeating the same themes, repeating themes, important moments where those themes might spike, or you might see this sort of heat turned up a little bit. And that's going to be again, between the 1st and 5th, when Venus first squares Neptune, on the 13th and 14th, right around that time, Venus turns retrograde. Mars is also going to enter Pisces, and that turns up the heat a little bit. And then May 22nd and 23rd, Mercury and Venus conjoin and then square Neptune, and then the new moon in Gemini comes through. And that's a whole lot of energy placed in your ninth house this month, squaring Neptune in your sixth. So that's the main dynamic we want to talk about for everybody. And let's start by understanding the ninth house. So ninth house is the place of the higher mind. It was traditionally called the joy of the sun and the house of God. It was related to the higher mind, religion, philosophy, spirituality, long journeys or pilgrimages. And in general, it's the place where we look for truth, where we look for our larger sense of meaning or connection in the cosmos, and also the inherent laws of the cosmos, from karma to physics. So with a lot of energy focused in that house this month, the question has to do with faith and belief, or it has something to do with education, or maybe foreign countries or foreign places, but that's the primary thematic focus. Then simultaneously, we're looking at the overlap between those topics and Venus. Venus, of course, is the goddess of love, relationships, romance, beauty, aesthetics, friendships, women, sisters. So with Venus retrograde in the ninth house, you could be going back to school. There could be an overlap between your relationships or social life and the topic of school or religion or beliefs. You could also see maybe some travel plans being delayed because of Venus retrograde in that house. We could also see the potential for there to be some themes also of Neptune in the sixth house that are coloring all of this because of the squares all month long to Neptune in the sixth house. So Neptune's going to bring a more imaginative, mystical, romantic dimension to the transit. And it also, the sixth house was traditionally a place of misfortune. It was related to ill health and disease, but also to service for those who are suffering. So you're also thinking about things like the rights of victims or people who are sick or ill, and maybe some desire to do compassionate or charitable work. Or you're looking at the overlap between faith, science, medicine, things like that, or spirituality and active service in the world, or also spirituality that is changed, awakened, or enlivened by some kind of difficult experience. Neptune in the sixth square Venus in the ninth is also about the misfortune that may lead you to want to, kind of tap back into your spiritual life. It oftentimes takes that, unfortunately, for us to remember the importance of our spiritual life. But, Neptune Venus can be about healing and redemption and restoration of faith, but usually because with the sixth house there are some elements of difficulty or sickness or illness that we're having to explore. It's a great time to find religious or academic groups that have a theme of healing. For example, I've had clients with the transits between these two houses get involved in AA or Al-Anon or a religious community of some kind. Um, I've also had people across these two houses suddenly get the feeling like I need to study something new. I need an apprenticeship, and I have to go back to beginner's mindset in some way. So you watch for these kinds of themes as the month unfolds. Now, a couple of other dates that are going to be really important this month, starting around the 4th. When we look at the 4th of the month, we see that Mercury is Cazimi with the sun on that day. That's landing in your 8th house if you're a Libra. And that could mean that first of all, Mercury Cazimi usually brings a kind of empowered mercurial theme. So empowered messages or messengers, empowered information, speaking, clarity, good ideas, clear cutting insights. Because this is also Mercury is moving into a square with Mars later in the month between the 12th or between the 9th and the 11th. And so this immediate energy of like gaining clarity, but then needing to put it in action, this sort of clear cutting executive mindset that starts to build from the 4th all the way up to the 9th and the 11th when Mercury then squares Mars in the chart. And you can see that that's building already at this time, but there it is. There's the square, and that square will perfect between the 9th and the 11th. So kind of a moment of mental breakthrough that leads to some need to take strong or decisive action. Could also be about the misfortune of other people in your life, and or even difficulties surrounding your kids if you have them, and just stuff that they're dealing with that might not be as easy. But I think that the positive of this transit is that the 8th and the 5th usually have this way of being resourceful and of finding good and helpful things despite difficulty or upheaval. The 8th house is related to death, but the 5th house is related to good fortune. In ancient astrology, that could mean that there are difficulties, but that they are mixed with unexpected good fortune. So in a general sense, I look at this as another one of the most important transits of the month for Libras, especially because it suggests some kind of clear insight that might be coming through the midst of some degree of turmoil or difficulty that really helps you make positive changes, even if there are some stressors along the way. But watch for the mental clarity to start around the 4th, and then the taking action with whatever message you're receiving from like the 9th to the 11th. Okay, so the other big transit earlier on in the month is happening on the 7th. And this tells me this is the full moon in Scorpio in your 2nd house. Now, this tells me, along with the planets in the 8th house, which is also a house of other people's money, and the 2nd house being a house of your own money or finances, that conversations around your assets may be really important this month, whether that's insurance or bills or taxes or benefits that you're receiving like unemployment or some kind of aid that you're receiving, or mortgage or something like that, or conversations about money and relationships, that the finances may be a little bit more stressful, or there may be some more internal stress around finances and money at the full moon, which is May 7th. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's not as simple as just your own financial situation, if it's dependent upon someone or something else that you're having to work with or deal with. For example, I'm trying to get unemployment right now, and I'm dealing with some sort of tenuous experience around that, or I'm helping my kids out, or someone else is helping me out. So the overlap also between your own money or finances and someone else's could be a real theme. So those transits are earlier on in the beginning of the month, and those are the ones that I wanted to add in addition to the big topic, which is your 9th to 6th house. A lot this month in terms of the higher mind, education, spirituality. I think that's really where the focus is. So that is our forecast for Libra. Let's back it up, and actually I'm going to start again on that new moon around the 22nd, 23rd, and we're going to put Aquarius on the ascendant now. So if you are Aquarius sun or Aquarius rising, here is what it looks like for you. So again, we have this huge stellium of planets on the 23rd, 22nd and 23rd, new moon in Gemini on the 22nd. And then between the 22nd, 21st, and 23rd, you have Mercury conjoining with Venus in your 5th house, and both are square to Neptune. Of course, Neptune is in your 2nd house. Mars also enters your 2nd house in Pisces between say the 12th and 13th of the month. So it's a story, though, of this axis, your second and fifth house axis, all month long. And let's run through the total timeline. Venus will square Neptune between the 1st and the 7th. Then Venus turns retrograde in Gemini on the 13th and 14th. This is all in your fifth house to Neptune in the 2nd. And then on the 22nd and 23rd, you've got Mercury and Venus conjoining in Gemini, squaring Neptune. And then you have the new moon in Gemini in your fifth house. Okay, so let's start with the core of this, which is your fifth house. So it's traditionally called the joy of Venus and the house of good fortune. And it has to do with, say, your parents or family, money, or wealth. It's the second house from the fourth traditionally. So it could have something to do with family and money dynamics around family. Children and pregnancy are also part of the fifth house. And the themes around your children, your own children, or the theme or topic of pregnancy could be really pronounced. And this is something that is the new moon at the end of the month is toning and sort of implanting the whole next lunar cycle with these fifth house themes all the way through to the summer solstice in late June. The fifth house is also, generally speaking, a place that has to do with Venus. It was called the joy of Venus. Venus is anything that's fun, pleasing, pleasant, enjoyable, sensual, or appeasing to the senses. So that means like whatever you do for fun, whether it's dancing or sports or creativity or sex or, going to a restaurant. I know a lot of restaurants aren't open right now, but the question of a fifth house transit is either what am I creating or what am I doing to experience joy or happiness? Or maybe something related to just that chance or circumstantial good fortune that just induces joy and pleasure. So this is really good for Aquarians, especially since Saturn just ingressed into your first house. That's your ruling planet. Nothing like having your ruling planet in your own first house to get your priorities in line, because it really, the ruling planet of your own ascendant sign coming into your first house, especially a slower moving planet like Jupiter or Saturn, brings the focus back to oneself and just says, who am I? What am I doing? What's important to me? And then with all this fifth house emphasis during this Venus retrograde between now and August, the question is also, and am I having fun? Am I joyful? Am I happy? Am I exercising my creative juices? That kind of thing. Could go along with having a baby, so be careful about that. But anyway, now along with that though, with the squares from Venus retrograde in the fifth house, which can range from romantic to creative transformation, there's also a question about money and finances that's coming up around purchases or values and spending or your budget. And there could also be, you really have to be careful with Neptune and Venus about expensive, extravagant, or sort of glamorous things that you get lost in or taken up by or swept away by. So as much as the transit looks to me like there's some reprioritization of your creative life, of the need for greater joy and happiness and making changes that you need to in that area, this is also the kind of transit that could mean something like I'm going to shopaholics therapy, or I've got a kid who's going to rehab because we're going overboard with pleasure. I got a kid who is selling drugs or something like that. I mean, I know that sounds really terrible, but where pleasure and illusion and intoxication go together and maybe affect finances or money or, drain you of some essential resource. That part you want to be careful of. But anyway, this is the baseline of your month of May, are these two houses and these topics. Could overlay again with relationships and romantic relationships, friendships, sisters, women, all Venusian things. So watch for that as well. Don't be surprised if there's a real theme that comes in around money and finances during all of this too. Now, other transits in the month that are really important for you if you're an Aquarius rising. So let's go back to the beginning of the month, right around May 4th. You have a cazimi between the Sun and Mercury in your fourth house of home and family. And then that's on the 4th. And then between the 9th and the 11th, Mercury will then square Mars in your first house. It seems to me as though there's some kind of epiphany that has to do with your home, your family, or your living environment. And this epiphany is going to drive you to take some kind of action or make some kind of choice or decision later in the month But you'll notice this coming through around the 4th when the Mercury Cazimi hits, and then 9th to the 11th is when you start wanting to take action or make big choices. And again, I would see it centered on things like home, family, property, and some need to take action and do something, or some kind of executive choice. Could be a little volatile mentally and in terms of your communication and speech, so you do want to be careful of that. Now, the last thing is that, remember that right around the 12th into the 13th, Mars is going to enter Pisces, and that moves Mars into your second house of money and finances. Mars in that house can mean that you are taking more aggressive steps or actions to make money, or that there's some kind of entrepreneurial endeavor coming through. It can also mean some degree of hardship, or just oppressive, more aggravating circumstances around money. Mars is a malefic. Mars can bring difficulties, whatever house it's in. So maybe some difficulties with money starting up around the 12th into the 13th. It's not going to last forever. Get it into June a ways, and Mars is going to. I'll just show you. Mars changed signs in what? Let's see. So that second, I like to say when it comes to finances, I know people get a little freaked out. So Mars changes signs out of your financial house by the end of June, like June 28th. So it doesn't last forever. But at any rate, let's go ahead and, sorry, I've got this all over the place now. Let's put Aquarius back on the ascendant. So that's what I've got for Aquarians this month. Hopefully that was helpful. Now let's go and put Gemini on the ascendant to close. So now if you are a Gemini rising, this is a huge time for you, because obviously this whole Venus retrograde is taking place in your home sign, in your first house. And it doesn't get more, in some ways more intense than that. So let's go ahead and just show you what this is going to look like around the busiest time of the month, which is, here's that new moon coming in right around the 22nd into the 23rd. I'll just put this forward by 1 day so you can see it a little bit better. So there's the new moon in Gemini in your first sign in home house, and all of that Gemini energy all month long, especially Venus, squaring Neptune in your 10th house. Venus goes retrograde in your first house around the 13th and 14th. The 1st to the 5th of the month, Venus will square Neptune in Pisces at the top of your chart. So it's all month long a first house, 10th house dynamic. First house is the house of health and vitality. It's a house of inceptions, meaning you start things or things are born or begin here, especially new endeavors or new actions, even babies being born sometimes. And then it's a house that has to do with your essential nature, identity. So when that's all hitting a square to Neptune in the 10th house of career, it's something of, you could say, a professional / identity crisis, where you could say that you're going, who am I? Where am I going? What's happening with my life direction due to Neptune's dissolving transformative effect in the 10th house of career. So if you're facing a little bit of an existential crisis this month as to where you're going professionally and where that leaves you as an individual, like when our jobs are taken away because of, say, something like the coronavirus, it's a really deep moment where we can be like, what am I doing? Where am I going? Am I secure in the world? What is my calling any longer? I have a lot of clients, who are, the places that they work are just maybe never going to be there again. And so then the question comes up, well, where does that leave me now? Who am I? Big questions for Gemini rising this month. Venus turning retrograde in your first house. That is, a sign of existential crisis on some level, or it can be about some, I don't want to say superficial, but relatively superficial things like your wardrobe or your appearance or your health, or just kind of redoing, revising, remaking yourself in some way. But I think it's quite a bit deeper than that this month for Geminis because of the square to Neptune in the 10th house. The 10th house is going to start getting more intense, that house of career, when Mars enters Pisces between the 12th and the 13th of the month. So, it doesn't, it's a month where anything that's happening very personally is just really closely related to what's happening professionally. Now, of course, there could be some overlap around things like love, friendships, or sexuality, your love life. That's Venus retrograde. But it's also about what your values are, what you're doing, and some fundamental change that's happening that's very personal, but is tied in very closely to the imaginative, but also somewhat disorienting energies of Neptune in your career house. So, in addition to that, if we back up, go back to say the 4th of the month, you're going to see the Cazimi from the Sun and Mercury, and Mercury's Cazimi at the heart of the Sun in your 12th house. And then between, say, the 9th and the 11th, Mercury will go from that Cazimi into a square with Mars in your 9th house. Now, and so this transit, the sequence is interesting because it gives me the feeling, I've been saying this for almost every sign, but it ends in different, it shows up in different areas of life, but I've been saying the same thing for every sign, which is that it looks like a moment of greater clarity, of like mental breakthrough and greater clarity. And then it leads to the need to make a tough choice or a hard decision, or this kind of more cutting level of analysis, and then execution and doing something. And that's the Mars Mercury square that comes. Now, between the 12th and the 9th, you got to be a little bit careful here. The potential to be a little bit reckless, impulsive, or, self-destructive because of Mercury's Cazimi in the 12th, like a great idea that becomes almost too rash or impulsive or reckless, driven by beliefs or convictions that are just too intense or too severe in some way. That's the 12th house nature of this. But on the other hand, you could be getting clarity about something that you need to end or that you need to let go of. Or there could also be some degree of critical critical speech, combative speech relative to your beliefs or ideas. So be careful not to get drawn into really intense debates or conflict verbally, mentally, especially around differing political or religious views. Especially again between, say, the 9th and the 11th, especially as Mercury is square to Mars in your 9th house. Also a great time for analysis, problem solving, really looking at why something isn't working, and then figuring out how to make a change or how to adapt or shift gears somehow. I think there's really good problem solving energy this month if you're a Gemini, but it may require you to have some fundamental, some kind of shift of identity as a part of this as well. So those transits are the other ones that I have my eye on this month. So that is it for the air signs. I would love to hear your stories. I'd love to hear how things are going for you. Please tell me what's up in the comment section, and be sure to check out my May overview for all of the transits, and then stick with me as I break down each of the transits individually as the month goes on. You can certainly get a lot more insight that way as well. So I hope you guys are doing well, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Take it easy.